saw things that no human should ever see. Part 1. Where I'm from, there are urban legends about a decrepit cabin hidden deep within the thick forest that almost completely surrounds the small town. The stories passed to and between children tell of a man possessed by dark forces who used to reside in that eerie dwelling. The tales suggest that anyone who dared to venture into the cabin would vanish without a trace. According to the legends, this man committed heinous acts, including sacrificing and consuming those who came too close to his abode. Others spoke stories about portals to hell, witches, and pretty much any concoction of make-believe that could scare children. And as children, these tales usually kept us from going too deep into the woods and getting lost, which I always believed was the reason for the stories. Oh God, how wrong I was. It was a bright sunny day, and I was on a hike in the forest that I once feared so much because of the spine-chilling stories I heard as a kid. Strange as it might seem considering my history, I loved being in the woods by myself, just being alone with my thoughts, listening to the ambiance of Mother Nature. It happened way too rarely since I moved to a bigger city for work 10 years ago. The forest was beautiful during the day, not at all like the dark and ominous place I remembered from my childhood. I could feel the warmth of the sun on my skin, and the gentle breeze blowing through the trees carrying the song of different birds all around me. I hadn't been back here for many years, but seeing as I was visiting my parents and they had other things to do today, why not explore the deadly forest filled with nightmare creatures and evil cabins? I wasn't looking for it, but I wished that I would see the legendary cabin filled with dark powers and vile things. I almost felt like it was somewhere out here, waiting to be discovered. Suddenly I was on a mission to confront my childhood fears and prove to myself that the stories were just that. Stories. Motivated by a childish drive, I walked on and on. As the sun began to set, I kept mindlessly venturing further into the forest, and I found myself completely lost among the dense maze of different species of trees. But I wasn't scared. Instead, I felt invigorated by the unknown, as if I was on a treasure hunt. And then, it felt like the forest began to change. The trees around me seemed to close in, blocking out the sunlight and casting long shadows on the ground. The leaves stopped rustling, and the birds stopped singing. The silence was deafening, and an eerie feeling crept up my spine. My heart was racing with fear, and I tried to convince myself that it was just my imagination, but I knew deep down that something wasn't quite right. The air grew heavy, and the scent of the forest turned sour. The beauty of the forest that I had been admiring earlier seemed to fade away, replaced by an ominous aura. I felt as though I was being watched, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was not alone. I took a deep breath and decided to push on, determined to find the cabin and confront my childhood fears. This self-medicated sort of exposure therapy had become a habit of mine going many years back. Since I started confronting my fears instead of hiding from them, many of my anxieties have been put to rest, and I feel a lot more confident. But as I went further into the woods, the darkness closed in, and the shadows became deeper. My footsteps echoed eerily, and every twig snap made me jump and relive old memories of unwarranted fears. Suddenly, I saw it. The cabin of my and many others' nightmares. It was even more sinister and decrepit than I had imagined, overgrown with moss, crooked wooden boards, and gaping holes where windows used to be, like giant empty eyes staring into the great unknown of the dark forest. The hairs on my neck stood up, and a cold sweat broke out on my forehead. But I couldn't turn back now. I had to see it for myself. I felt a strange thrill of excitement run through me. I approached the cabin cautiously, feeling a sense of foreboding building within me. The door creaked open as I pushed it, and I stepped inside, my heart pounding in my chest. The interior of the cabin was pitch black, and I fumbled for my flashlight. As I turned it on, the beam of light illuminated the empty space that was supposed to be filled with the darkest of things. I took a few more steps forward. I felt almost disappointed that this was all it was, even though I knew it was just stories to scare children from going too deep into the woods. It was just an old cabin. As I walked through the dark, abandoned cabin, the lonely chair called to me, and I couldn't resist the urge to sit on it to absorb some of the eerie charms the cabin offered, even without all the ghoulies haunting it. As I settled into the creaky wooden seat, hoping it wouldn't break and send me tumbling around on the floor, the door slammed shut and my flashlight flickered and died, plunging me into complete darkness, leaving me fully vulnerable to the horrors that I was once told lurk in the shadows of this cursed place. Panic set in as I tried to stand up and flee, but an invisible force held me down, trapping me in the chair. There was something in the cabin with me, something dark and malevolent that had been waiting for me to arrive. I had fallen into its trap, and now there was no escape. I screamed and twisted in an attempt to break free from the chair that held me prisoner. To no avail. I couldn't reach for my lighter in my front pocket, but as my eyes adjusted to the darkness, the shadows began to take shape, and I saw a figure standing in the corner of the room. It was like a human-shaped shadow, and it was staring right at me. I tried to look away, but the figure made of pure darkness, with eyes that burned like red-hot coals, moved closer to me with an unnatural, twitchy gait. The shadow figure then hurled itself towards me, and I felt its icy breath on my face. I screamed as it grabbed me with its cold fingers, burning my skin. The touch sent a shockwave of fear through my body. Then nothing. I was standing in the forest. The cabin was nowhere to be seen. The figure was gone, and I was alone. I exhaled loudly with relief. Then the air grew colder, and the landscape became twisted and distorted. The trees looked like they were melting, and the rocks were pulsating with an otherworldly energy. A shadowy shape appeared in my peripheral, standing completely still and watching me with glowing orbs for eyes. When it began to move toward me, I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't obey me. The figure drew closer, revealing a face that looked like it had been torn off and sewn together again from pieces of rotting flesh. Its elongated limbs twitched and writhed, like it was a puppet being controlled by an unseen force as it made its way closer to me in the most unsettling way. It grabbed me with bony fingers that felt like ice, and I could taste its cold, putrid breath. I screamed as it pushed me into and through the ground like it was made of a thick liquid or quicksand. When I emerged on the other side, the figure was gone, but the nightmare was far from over. I was deeper within its grasp, with no hope of escape. Every breath felt like it could be my last, and I knew that I was trapped in a world of unspeakable terror. As I took in the surreal and perverted landscape, I could feel my mind struggling to comprehend what was before me. The twisted mountains that loomed like ancient giants defied all reason and rose up as jagged knives thrust into the earth with their peaks hidden in the murky darkness of the sky, contorting like they had been sculpted by some mad artist. The valleys between them were deep and treacherous, filled with a fog that seemed to swallow up anything that ventured too close. The colors were all wrong, as if the world had been painted by a deranged child with no concept of light or shadow. The sickening stench of decay permeated everything, and the ground squelched with a slimy, putrid substance that clung to my shoes like a noxious glue as I stepped forward. The air was thick with the stench of rot and decay, making it tough to breathe. But it was the sky that truly filled me with terror. An angry, swirling mass of black and red, shot through with flashes of sickly green and violet lightning that seemed to seep out of the sky like a poisonous gas. The clouds roiled like boiling tar, churning and shifting in an unnatural dance, and the wind howled like the screams of the damned, carrying with it the scent of decay and the sound of distant whispers. Throughout it all, I could feel the presence of other beings, watching me from beyond the veil of reality. They were like shadows, lurking just beyond the edge of my perception. I could feel their eyes on me, cold and unfeeling, like they were waiting for me to slip up so they could drag me down into their nests and consume me. As I stood there, feeling the weight of the otherworldly beings bearing down on me, I couldn't help but wonder what they were waiting for. Were they toying with me, waiting for the right moment to strike? Or were they simply content to watch, to observe me as I stumbled through this impossible landscape? I took a step forward, feeling the squelching of the ground beneath my feet, and the shadows shifted slightly, like they were drawing closer. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and I knew that I had to find a way out before it was too late. But as I looked around, all I saw were the twisted mountains, the deep valleys, and the swirling clouds. There was no obvious path, no way to navigate through this otherworldly terrain. I was lost, and I knew that I was running out of time. The laws of physics and logic had been shattered in this world, and it was as if I was walking through a fever dream made manifest. I could feel my grip on reality slipping away with every step, and I wondered if I would ever find my way back to the world I knew. As I walked further into the twisted landscape, the creatures around me began to multiply, each more terrifying than the last. There were creatures that scurried across the ground like centipedes in all manners of impossible shifting colors, their long legs tapping against the slimy surface. The rustling of their limbs was like a chorus of metals scraping, sending shivers down my spine. I could hear the slithering of others, moving like snakes with no discernible head or tail, their bodies contorting in impossible ways. Their scales gleamed like diamonds in the sickly green and violet lights that filtered through the clouds. The sound of their movement was a sibilant hiss, the whispering of secrets too terrible to utter. There were creatures that moved as if they were liquid, flowing across the ground like mercury, their eyes shining with cold, malevolent intelligence, and in the distance I could see others that moved as spiders, their spindly legs tapping against the ground, reminding me of the tick-tock of a clock. As I looked up, I saw creatures with the wings of bats, fluttering through the air with an eerie grace. Their screeches echoed through the valleys, like the wails of the dying. The very landscape itself these creatures roamed seemed to writhe and twist as if it was alive and aware. The trees were gnarled, and their branches reached out similar to bony fingers to grasp at anything that came too close. It was a world of darkness and horror, a place where the very fabric of reality seemed to be tearing apart. In the distance, I could see the faint outline of a city, but it was like no city I had ever seen before. I could see the crooked spires of the city jutting out from the landscape like the teeth of some colossal beast. Something was pulling me towards it. I felt as if I ever was going to survive this place. I needed to get there. I stumbled forward in this dizzying display of madness and chaos, and everywhere I looked, my eyes were assaulted by a myriad of grotesque and corrupted forms. The ground beneath my feet was shifting as I made my way toward the city, and the world around me seemed to bend and warp, like a carnival mirror distorting reality. It was like walking on a rolling sea of madness, where every step could send me tumbling into an abyss. As I struggled on, I could feel some of the creatures of this realm begin to close in around me. They moved with a kind of malevolent grace in the distance, their elongated limbs and unnaturally sharp angles making them seem almost beautiful in their own horrific way. From afar they whispered to me, their voices like the hissing of serpents, promising me things beyond my wildest dreams, if only I would give myself over to them. I felt my resolve slipping, my grip on reality faltering as their voices grew louder, more insistent. It was as if they were worming their way into my very mind, taking control of my thoughts and feelings. I could feel myself slipping away, losing the battle against the overwhelming horror of this place, but I knew that I needed to reach the city. Suddenly, a piercing scream filled the air, causing the ground to shake and sending tremors throughout the twisted landscape. The creatures that had been stalking me recoiled in fear, their eyes now wide with terror. It was as if the scream had come from some unimaginable horror, something that even they were afraid of. The creatures that had been stalking me fled, scurrying away like rats from a sinking ship. I realized then that I was in the presence of something truly ancient and powerful, something that had been lurking in the shadows since the dawn of time. I felt the immediate need to hide. I could see a small cave nestled between two jagged peaks. Without thinking, I threw myself into the cave and collapsed in a heap, gasping for breath.